In April 2024, Nestlé Waters had to destroy 2 million Perrier bottles after routine testing on one of the Perrier wells revealed the presence of E. coli bacteria, a direct indicator of fecal bacteria contamination.
Maybe it's something in the Perrier water.
This was just weeks after Perrier had to scrap 3 million more bottles in the direct aftermath of Storm Monica, whose heavy rain had sent Enterococcus levels in the mineral water brand's wells through the roof, reaching over 8 times the legal ceiling.
Blood, sweat, and Perrier.
What may sound like two unfortunate events happening one after another is, in fact, revealing a much deeper systemic issue that could lead Perrier, maybe the most iconic French mineral water, to its end, especially as an administrative order published on May 7, 2025 gives them 60 days to comply with a rule they cannot fulfill, placing them in a deadly catch-22.
We're out of Perrier!
Perrier's trouble complying with water quality standards first surfaced in early 2020 when internal emails leaked showing that the brand was aware of E. coli and Enterococcus contaminations in some of its production lines and putting those at a halt in waiting for retests and hopefully better results. But as results were not getting any better and as keeping the line still was a costly option, Nestlé Waters, the world's largest bottled water company who owns Perrier, went for a different solution. They implemented UV disinfection and activated carbon filtration to get rid of the bacteria. If that solution was indeed working, those are common treatments used in municipal drinking water production, it just had a tiny little drawback.
Any insignificant detail.
It is illegal. Waters marketing their natural mineral label are forbidden to use those and almost any other treatment as per a European regulation taken in 2009. Perrier was fully aware that this was indeed illegal, but between keeping their plants shut or adding a forbidden treatment to get them back to work, they chose what they considered to be the lesser of two evils. It went publicly unnoticed for a while until an informed senator raised the question to the French Ministry of Industry in the parliament in early summer 2021, leading their executives to be asked in the minister's office.
We lied and we got caught.
On August 31, 2021, Nestlé Waters CEO Muriel Liénot met with the cabinet of Industry Minister Agnès Pannier-Runacher and confessed to using not just UV and activated carbon, but doing so across multiple sites, Vittel, Épar, Contrex in the Vosges, and Perrier in Gare. Perrier is a French landmark, so before taking action, the minister, together with his health and economy colleagues, decided to check the scale of the issue by auditing all 104 French bottling plants. But that's where it gets tricky. They also decided to keep it all secret. The Senate report reveals that from the very first interministerial meeting on October 14, 2021, there was a deliberate strategy to maintain confidentiality. The government literally instructed not to involve local authorities, leaving prefects and regional health agencies in the dark for months. But beyond the questionable methodology, what that audit revealed 1 year later is that, in fact, Perrier wasn't the only one who used illegal treatments. 100% of the Nestlé Waters brands in France, like the ones I just named, Contrex, Épar or Vittel, were indeed, and as already confessed, using some art or shape of illegal filtration, but all brands together, this time, nearly 30% of all bottling companies were in that same situation. The Senate Commission found that other major players like Source Alma, which owns Cristalline, Tonon, and even distributes some prestigious brands, were also caught red-handed. So in September 2022, everybody was back in the industry minister's office to devise a hopefully legal solution. Hopefully. And Perrier, indeed, had an idea to solve the issue. They proposed replacing their UV disinfection and activated carbon filtration with an ultrafiltration membrane approach, claiming that this way they would not disinfect the water, they would just filter it a tad more, hence not affecting the organoleptic characteristics of the mineral treasure. I tell you, as a water engineer, this is
Jesus, Billy, watch your words.
But Nestlé had already invested 150 million euros at the Perrier sources and 95 million euros in the Vosges sites to implement this transformation plan before even getting official approval. In hindsight, all those millions for just filtration sounded like a lot, so I double-checked my figures, and the Senate report indeed says that nearly 95 million euros have been invested in the Vosges and 150 million euros in the Gare, and that not just for the filters, but also in changing some elements of the system. I'm quoting here, from drilling to the factory, changing pipes, changing pipe diameters, changing the entire installation. So It's not just filtration, but still, they had started with investment, not waiting for any government approval. Back to the story. Because after all, they would get that official approval easily, right? Well, actually, the French health administration was of the same opinion than me. This is They recommended to not give in on Nestlé Waters' demands and to purely suspend Perrier and its cousin brands Contrex, Epar and Vitel's mineral water licenses. The Health General Director, Jérôme Salomon, even wanted to report the criminal fraud to prosecutors as early as October 2021, but was dissuaded by his own legal department. But with 1,000 jobs on the line at Perrier alone, the issue got escalated all the way to the top of the French government, where the then Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne had to make a decision. She sided with Nestlé and legalized the 0.2 micrometer filtration approach, officially motivating that decision as a way to prevent massive job losses. The Senate report reveals that Nestlé explicitly used employment as leverage, what the health administration called blackmail, threatening job cuts in the Vosges if their demands were not met.
I didn't choose a thug life. Thug life chose me.
Meanwhile, Nestlé Waters was also finding an agreement with the French justice to settle the legal disputes around the use of the illegal UV/activated carbon tandem, and there as well, they shook hands over a €2 million fine. Ironically, the Senate Commission estimates that during the period of illegal treatments, Nestlé sold approximately €375 million worth of non-compliant mineral water just from the Perrier site, and another €220 million from the Vosges, honestly making that fine look like pocket change. But now that they had a government agreement and a fine paid, it probably was all good for them, right? Well, not really. At the end of 2023, the health administration was back at it, writing internal notes flagging its insufficient confidence in Perrier's resource quality, listing beyond recurrent fecal bacteria, pesticides, and PFAS contaminations. The commission revealed that the health authority had to implement a reinforced surveillance plan for Nestlé Waters in October 2023, including virological risks, confirming the state had been underestimating health hazards all along. As you may recall from my PFAS video, there is no regulation on PFAS in bottled water. Yet, there's one on pesticides. And pesticides don't stop at an ultrafiltration. You would need a disinfection and/or an activated carbon step to remove those. If only Perrier had been allowed to use those. Right? This brings us to 2024 and to the March and April events when Perrier had to destroy the 3+2 million bottles for E. coli and Enterococcus contaminations. How those flew past the ultrafiltration step is a mystery to me, but it happened. This brought renewed media attention to the Perrier sources, ultimately leading the European Union to poke France's shoulder and ask why they had authorized that ultrafiltration step in the first place when the EU directive clearly states that anything with a smaller than 0.8 micrometer mesh was forbidden. The Senate report confirms that the European Commission only learned about these practices through press articles in January 2024. France had forgotten and violated its obligation to inform Brussels about difficulties with mineral water sources. Oopsie! From then on, things really went down for the green bottle brand. In April 2025, a Nestlé executive had to concede in a French Senate audition that hydrogeologist experts had given negative opinion on renewing Perrier's mineral license. The commission uncovered that multiple Perrier boreholes showed clear doubts about the original purity of the water, a fundamental requirement in mineral water status. And then on May 7, 2025, the prefect of Gare sent Nestlé a formal notice to remove their 0.2 micrometer filters within 60 days because they were, in fact, illegal and were modifying the native microflora, hence breaching the 2009 European directive. But Perrier can't remove the filter as its water is not clean enough, which means that by early July, they may lose their mineral water label. To which you may think, and so what? And I'd be with you on that one, honestly. Sure, the filtered or disinfected Perrier water is not as raw as mineral regulation wants it to be, but at least it's potable, right? Well, to understand the issue, we have to understand how culturally important mineral water is in Europe. In fact, that veneration is not born with modern marketing. It can be traced all the way to ancient Rome, when spring water with high sulfate and calcium contents was prescribed for rheumatic and leprosy treatments. Almost every European country has its magical waters. Carlsbad in Germany marketed its sodium bicarbonate-rich sources as a digestive cure since the 16th century. Vichy in France is renowned for making your skin glow with its water since the 17th century. Evian was marketed as a kidney stone remedy in the 19th century, sending 4 million bottles a day to the large French cities as pharmaceutical water in 1890. And Vichy, again, even went to water drop automation in 1934, with brass token machines delivering you the exact amount of healing water prescribed by your doctor to the milliliter. I'm not saying that all of this is pure nonsense, and I'm not a doctor. We've seen epidemiologic studies showing that some types of minerals in some concentrations seemingly had a macro effect on the population's health. I've talked about lithiated waters, for instance, in that video I'm linking you here. But my conviction is that quite a bunch of these water perks are marketing inflated, especially when you consider that 3% of our body's minerals come from what we drink and 97% from what we eat. And in fact, if it wasn't for marketing, bottled water in general and mineral water in particular would still be a very, very niche topic. Indeed, when Perrier first tried to make a dent in the US water market with its green round glass bottle, everybody was skeptical. Why would one spend so much on bottled water when perfect drinking water is available at a fraction of the cost at the tap? Why would you bother carrying the bottles around when you just have to lift the faucet? Well, in the 1970s, Perrier went against the common belief that this was nonsense, and they hired Orson Welles for $500,000 per TV spot to tell everyone that
deep below the plains of southern France, in a mysterious process begun millions of years ago, nature herself adds life to the icy waters of a single spring. Perrier.
This campaign and some of the other clever tricks they used is rightfully considered marketing genius today, and 50 years later, the $50 billion spent on bottled water in the US dwarf the handful of millions paid to Orson Welles, while many more movie stars have been promoting Perrier without them even having to pay a cent.
Gallons of Perrier.
Hey, can I have some salt and Perrier?
I just have a Perrier.
I only have Perrier on draft.
I'll have a Perrier.
Can you have a little Perrier or something?
What? Perrier, please.
Perrier water is what you want, right?
Perrier with lime, no ice.
Can I get a bottle of Perrier, please?
So I raise my bottle of Perrier.
Unless you have Perrier?
You got a Perrier?
Yes, room service does not answer, and we need a dozen bottles of Perrier up here right away.
It's also no coincidence that Pepsi and Coca-Cola also have their bottled water brands. Water represents 41% of all soft drink dollars, and 2 countries in the world, Mexico and the US, actually spend more on bottled water annually than they do on municipal water. To understand what this represents in Mexico, bottled water is the second largest household expense after tortillas. Do whatever you want with that information. But where that is an empire built on a relatively weak foundation, though, is that if bottled water can't argue anymore that it is qualitatively better than tap water, then it just becomes the same, but less convenient and 100 times more expensive, right? As the French Senate's commission highlighted, mineral water selling for 100 to 400 times the price of tap water is a premium solely justified by that purity claim. And on that front, Nestlé's troubles with its French brands are just the tip of the iceberg. We've seen in my PFAS video how unfiltered, pure, natural, pristine waters were infinitely more likely to have PFAS in it than their filtered counterparts. Oh, and if you wonder about Perrier on that front, in June 2023, the Regional Health Authority showed total PFAS above the upcoming European drinking water 0.5 microgram per liter limit in one of their boreholes. Again, that's a tap water regulation, no PFAS cap exists yet in bottled water, so the exceedance may be alarming, but it's legal. At least for now, because the Senate Commission now recommends comprehensive PFAS testing of all mineral water sources in 2025. And if we're concerned with trace compounds, we should maybe get started with microplastics somewhere down the line, right? Because if microplastics were not enough yet, a 2024 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science found a mean of 240,000 nanoplastic particles per liter in leading bottled water brands, which is about 10 to 100 times the previous microplastic counts. To be fair to Perrier this time, the Columbia study did not disclose the brands, and other studies that disclosed them found microplastics in Perrier. Yes, but much less so than in other brands, such as the worst-in-class Vital Kids. By the way, another Nestlé brand. Maybe the perks of the still distinctive bottle, even if it is no longer in glass. But while that's a story for another day, let's not get fooled either. The fundamental reason why Carlsbad, San Pellegrino or Evian became cultural icons is that at a time when we didn't master water treatment as we do today, they were an alternative that always proved to be safe. And the fact that even those natural treasures now are polluted is a terrible testimony to what's at work in the world. Perrier is just the latest installment of an ongoing trend. The combination of a booming population, an over-abstraction of the resource, which speeds up the natural filtration, insufficient wastewater treatment, and the intensive agriculture needed to feed an 8 billion people world, has created a terrible cocktail that shows in groundwater's quality. If Perrier has to shut some of its wells, it will join a cluster of 4,000 water capture plants in France that had to be closed since the 1980s for quality failures, which is about 10% of the total, always taken together. The Senate Commission notes that the degradation of water resources due to both anthropogenic and natural pollution is a primary driver behind the illegal treatments, alongside aging infrastructure and what they diplomatically call industrial process security. This means ever fewer mineral waters will be drinkable as is, without treatment, sure, but it also means that always more everyday drinking water plants will need to beef up their treatment steps and add ultrafiltration, activated carbon, UV disinfection, ion exchangers or ozonation steps. And as much as water engineers know exactly how to remove everything that can be found in water or to add back whatever we agree should be in it, none of this comes for free. When people demonstrate to claim that water should be free, it's time to show them that even if they were able to drill 100 meters under the earth, as in Perrier's case, and even if they were granted free energy to pump that water back to the surface, they would probably still not be able to drink it as is and would need to put some kind of treatment in place, which they would then realize is not free. I, by the way, strongly believe that one of the reasons why bottled water in general, and again, mineral water in particular, have this aura of superiority versus tap water is that it's egregiously more expensive. This is called the Veblen effect. In short, it postulates that we find Balenciaga hype and trendy because it is expensive, and not the other way around, that it would be expensive because it is hype and trendy. And you know what? I believe Nestlé Waters agrees with me on that analysis. Here's where my belief comes from. In 2 months, Perrier might lose its mineral water label. Now, they could decide to live with it and just become a regular bottled water brand, stripped of its mineral status, but hence authorized to use UV, activated carbon, ultrafiltration or even reverse osmosis if they see fit. But this would also mean they would start losing their premium. They would enter the lower tier of bottled waters and just become an expensive alternative in that lower bracket. And Nestlé Waters has different aspirations. They would rather transition Perrier to Maison Perrier, a flavored sparkling water beverage that surfaces the trend of the likes of bubbly and LaCroix, and digs a new category in the soda family while still benefiting from the Perrier aura. After all, they created a category in the 1970s and they can well do that again. Nestlé projects that Maison Perrier could triple its shares of the Perrier source's revenue by 2027, starting from roughly 18% today. Said differently, Nestlé might solve Perrier's struggles by effectively ending it. And transitioning it to something new, just milking what's left of the brand recognition. But there's an even bigger twist to the story. Nestlé might not be around to see this transition through. In November 2024, the company announced it would spin off its entire water division into a standalone business, and by May 2025, they had hired Rothschild & Co. to find a buyer. The water business, which generated only 722 million Swiss francs in Q1 2025, less than 4% of Nestlé's total revenues, is expected to fetch over 5 billion euros, with private equity giants like Blackstone, KKR, and One Rock Capital Partners reportedly interested. Now, the timing is no coincidence. As new CEO Laurent Frex admitted in May 2025, In order to fully realize its potential, we require a partner as a co-investor so we can avoid diverting funds for growth from our main operations. Translation: the water business needs massive investments to fix its contamination problems, and Nestlé would rather spend that money on KitKat and Nescafé. The Senate Commission's revelations documenting government cover-ups, destroyed evidence, and a system where industrialists literally wrote their own inspection reports might have just accelerated what was already in motion. When you've sold 595 million euros worth of fraudulent mineral water, and your only punishment is a 2 million euro fine and a pat on the back, maybe it's time to cash out before the real reckoning comes. Now, if you're looking for a happy end, I still have one for you. What if we could address the ever-rising challenges of water scarcity and environmental pollution through wastewater discharges, all the while creating a new category of fancy beverages at only a fraction of the cost of the current fanciest mineral waters? Potable reuse of water may well be that exact step you're looking for, and it's been rolled out at scale by forward-looking countries. And if you wonder how and why, have a look here, and if you subscribe, which I'd obviously highly recommend, I'll see you next time.